When I tell you the hatred that I have for this book is so deep in my soul that I have to stop this review here. Some of y'all are gonna be real mad when I show you this. I'm gonna call this my villain origin story for exactly why I stopped liking enemies to lovers. Hi everyone, it's Shar. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. Today I'm doing a video I have never done on this channel, and that is an unhaul. Listen, I got tired of looking at the books that I don't like on my shelf, and I was reorganizing my shelves, which you will see very soon. I decided with spring right around the corner, it's time for me to get rid of these books. Now, I'm not going to give you a summary for each of these books just because that would make this video way too long, and I didn't like them, so I'm not recommending them to you. What I am going to do is let you know why this book didn't work for me or why I didn't like it. So without further ado, let's get through it because there are a lot of them. The first book that I'm unhauling is What If It's Us. This is a queer Queelian love story set in New York City. I found that it read a little bit too young for the intended age group, and I was just bored. I didn't feel any connection to the story, and so when I finished it, it was just 3 stars, so I am getting rid of this one. I have in fact never read Hairpin Bridge. And you know what, besties? I haven't heard anything good since this book came out. So I'm happy to give this one a miss, and I will be letting this one go. The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins was a pretty disappointing read for me just because I loved the Jane Eyre story, and I really enjoyed Reckless by Rachel Hawkins, but this one was a miss just because it was a Jane Eyre retelling to the T, and I really wanted more out of this story. So goodbye to this one. My expectations for the murder of Roger Ackroyd were too high. I do love a murder mystery, and I cannot deny that, of course, this would be a classic murder mystery, but the thing that gags everyone about this book is the ending, and to me, I was like, that was fucking stupid. It's not a surprise ending. It's an ending that was not plotted at all. So, bye-bye. This one breaks my heart, because look at how freaking stunning this book is, and yet I didn't like it. I thought this was boring, and we spend the entire story inside one of the characters' heads, which is ridiculous because they're literally on a magical quest, yet you see almost nothing of that magical quest because she's too busy thinking the same thing again and again and again for the entirety of this book. That was sapphic, so I was like, how dare this book not live up to what I wanted it to be? How do you make a sapphic story about witches boring? I don't know, but that book managed to do it. I thought I was different, and it turns out I'm not, because I didn't like 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. Number one, this spoils so many murder mysteries for you intentionally, which is so fucking annoying to read. And this was just not memorable. What happened in this book? I don't know. There was a murder mystery, obviously, but just not well done. The only thing I remember about this book is how many other books it spoiled. How I wish that I was one of the girlies, but I apparently am not, because I read The Unhoneymooners, this long ass fucking book, and I didn't like it. The ending of this book pissed me off, and I'm gonna call this my villain origin story for exactly why I stopped liking enemies to lovers. Absolutely not. Death Note Volume 1 and 2. This is the black edition, so it has 2 different mangas in it. As beautiful as this book is, the story of Death Note is just not for me. I've read the first few pages of the story. I know this gets very like detective and copy. Wow, that's not a word. Detectives and police enforcement, that's not something that I'm into reading. And also, I don't like the main character, and it very much is giving the lesson absolute power corrupts absolutely, and I have no interest in reading this book. Breathless by Amy McCulloch. I should have liked this story, and there were elements to the story that I did like because it's a survivalist murder mystery set on like a super tall mountain where there's very little oxygen, and the elements are like a huge factor in their survival. But I didn't like this, and the only reason I didn't like this is I don't feel like it was well balanced enough. Again, this was a 3-star read for me, so it's not like I hated it, but so much of this story was bogged down by climbing jargon, and Amy McCulloch herself has done expeditions like this and is a climber or has accomplished certain things in the climbing world, and her knowledge comes through in this, which would be fine if it was a nonfiction story about her climb, but it isn't. It's a murder mystery, and the average day-to-day reader does not need to know all of these things about climbing and how it works. But if you love mountain climbing and you love murder mysteries, you're gonna love this book. I just didn't want to read something that felt like a textbook of climbing. The Two Lions. This is a manga. I gave this 2 stars. It was boys love, which made me sad that I gave it such a low rating, but it was just very disjointing and confusing to follow. And at the end, I had almost no feelings at all about it besides what happened? What did I just read? So this book is now leaving my shelf. Black Butler feels like a story for an 8-year-old. I didn't like it, and so it leaves. This one just made me really sad because this is when I started to collect books for my travels. If you're new here, I do a lot of solo traveling, and this was a book that I got in London, not last year when I did that whole I was backpacking in Europe for a little while, but I think the year before. Whenever I was in London, I picked this book up, and it's so pretty, and I love this edition of it, but the way that it's told is in a series of short stories, and I just don't think that that vignette style worked for me for what this story was trying to accomplish. I, of course, loved the main male character and what was being explored here around his sexuality and identity, but it didn't resonate for me in the way that I wanted it to. This is the worst fucking book I've ever read. I hate this book so much. I actually gave this book 1 star. There's too many fucking characters. The murder mystery in here is not interesting, and I don't like Lucy Foley's writing style. When I tell you the hatred that I have for this book is so deep in my soul that I have to stop this review here because I will rant in a very not nice way. Why are all these books disappointing me? This makes me sad too. I wanted to love Delilah Green Doesn't Care. I just didn't. And here's why. I love Delilah. Delilah was that bitch. I was into her. I was rooting for her happily ever after. But I was not rooting for her happily ever after with this character. Not because they didn't work well together, but because the history that they had and how she was complacent in Delilah's bullying was never addressed. And I could not get over that because I don't like bully romance. And of course, she's no longer a bully, but I don't like that this book brushed over all of the pain that Delilah experienced and was kind of like, oh well. Everyone was in pain, but they took it out on Delilah, and that was never addressed. And when I tell you, I hate Astrid to the fucking depths of my soul, but I don't hate her more than I hate Iris. This book made me angry because of the background characters. I read this book recently in a blind date with a book video, and while I thought this book was cute in the end, it's not something that I ever have any intention of rereading, and I didn't like it enough for me to keep it on my shelf. It was a pretty standard enemies to lovers story with an interesting premise of having the HOA involved, but like with Grumpy Sunshine, it sometimes falls into the pits where the main character is actually just an asshole, and she was deeply immature. Writing style just doesn't work for me either. This was also featured in Blind Date with a book, and I opened this and my heart immediately dropped because I had no intention of ever reading this book, and I attempted to, and I'm glad to tell you that my instincts were right, and I had no intention of reading this book, and I was right for feeling that way. So someone else can love this brand new book because it's not going to be me. Some of y'all are going to be real mad when I show you this. It's 6 of Crows. I have attempted to read 6 of Crows 7 different times, and I have DNF'd it every single time. I've gotten further pretty much each time around, but the last time I DNF'd this, round 7, I just had to accept this book is not for me. I know people love 6 of Crows, so someone else can also love this book. We come to the books that I'm gonna have to figure out what to do because I annotated and tabbed it, so there's no way I'm gonna sell it, but I'll figure out something to do with these books. Finley Donovan is killing it. Of course, I wanted to be one of the girlies, and I'm not. I hate to say it, but a lot of the things that happened in here didn't make any fucking sense, and at many times I questioned if Finley had brain cells. It was supposed to be funny and quirky, and I can see that the author was attempting that, but the humor just did not work for me, and neither did the story. Oh my gosh, we're back to disappointing books. You all know that I loved A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, so I was so excited to pick up 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. I hated it. And that's all I'm gonna tell you. I gave it 2 stars. I have a reading vlog on my channel where I've read 5 Survive if you want to see my full reading experience and thoughts on this book, but it sure as hell was not for me, which is sad because at some point I just started rage annotating this, and you can see exactly where I gave up annotation and just accepted that I was not going to like this book. Hill Creek. This is when I was experimenting with like painting book edges, which was fine for my first ever attempt. I genuinely thought I would love this because it's haunted house horror, but I'm gonna be very, very honest with my thoughts here. I got the first 25, 30 pages into this book. The female character in here is very much portrayed like a man's fantasy of what a woman is. Like a woman written by a man. And it felt from the very first pages like this author really loves Stephen King and was trying to capture Stephen King's energy. And if you like Stephen King, maybe you'll like this book. I don't like Stephen King, and I don't like Stephen King's writing style. So I got the first sniff of it and I was like, ooh. No. A Stranger in the House is a book that I gave 2 stars, and the premise should have worked for me. Because again, this is a mystery about a woman who thinks that someone's breaking into her home, but somehow it just manages to be annoying. Chalkman by CJ Tudor was just okay for me. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, it was just middle of the road, and I didn't take away anything significant from this story, so it can free up room on my shelves for a book that I'm going to love more. Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. I annotated the absolute fuck out of this in the hopes that it would convince me to love it. But I'm going to openly admit here, I think that I fucked this book up for myself because I read Our Last Echoes first, where nowhere does it mention that these books are linked, but they are. So the fact that I read Our Last Echoes first just spoiled what was happening in Rules for Vanishing for me. I think if I ever read this in a different mood, maybe I would like it. It was just disappointing for me. It was 3 stars, so it wasn't bad. But I was mad that I had ruined it for myself by reading Our Last Echoes first because I didn't know any better. But if you're thinking of reading this, don't read Our Last Echoes first. They're connected. Now, this makes me mad because why are so many of the books here queer books? I love queer literature. I love sapphic romances. This was disappointing again. I love Alexandria Bellefleur. Her Written in the Stars book, loved that. And Count Your Lucky Stars is one of my all-time favorite sapphic romances. I'm obsessed with that. So when The Fiancé first came out, I was so excited that I took my ass to Barnes & Noble. And I bought this book the week that it came out, full price. Which if you're new here, I almost never do because most of my books are secondhand books. This did not work for me. Her love story just felt rushed. And again, the humor took away from the romance of this book in that it was trying so hard to be funny that the spotlight was on the funny scenes rather than the development of the relationship between these 2 characters, which was sad for me. I have no idea how many books that was, but those are all of the books that I am unhauling, my loves. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'm going to see you in my next video. Bye!